Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for being here tonight. We obviously have an election coming up in November in the village of Volente. We have 3 seats on the village council that are up for contention. We have had a total of 8 potential candidates for those 3 seats. 2 of those candidates are here tonight, but Robert, right over here, Robert was appointed to council earlier in October, and so he is withdrawn and is not a valid candidate for this election cycle, but his name will be on the ballot. In the same way, Cynthia Mallow, who's in the back right here, Cynthia was also registered and is a candidate. Her name will be on the ballot, but she's withdrawn from contention. So please remember that those 2, at least options, and we'll try and publicize this, have withdrawn themselves and should not be voted for during the election. We have 6 other candidates. The 3 that are here tonight are all the incumbents that are on council right now that have served for 2 years. So Andy Fogarasi, Steve Baker, Kit Hopkins are all candidates for re-election and have served for at least the last 2 years. There are 3 other candidates that were invited to be with us tonight, those being Bill Connors, Sean Ryan, and Chris Wilder. They were invited to be here, and for their own personal reasons, they chose not to attend this forum. And so it is what it is. Tonight, thanks to Robert and his profession, he's got the ability to record this, and so the intent was to record it on video, put it onto our website, so anyone who can't attend either of the forums would be able to go to the Village of Volente website and look at a forum and the questions responded, see the people, and help them make an informed decision. That's what we are striving for, is an informed vote as it comes to November. So tonight, I'm Ken Beck. I'm the mayor of the Village of Volente. We're not in that role tonight. I'm just a moderator for tonight, trying to stay as neutral as possible. But I will be asking some questions of the candidates, asking them each to respond. And after a number of questions, keeping track of time, I'm going to also open it up to the community who is here, the residents of the Village of Volente who are here, and give you an opportunity to ask some questions as well. We're going to be conscious of how long we run, because the videotape could get just absolutely too long to get into the system. So with that, with your understanding, just remember we are recording, so please be respectful, be civil, as we hope that everyone in Volente is tonight. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a timer to try and manage the effective use of time. I'm going to give 3-minute opportunities to each of whether they're introducing themselves or they're answering a question. I'm going to use 3 minutes as the timer. So please use that as kind of a guide. I'll put my hand up as we get close to the 3 minutes and then tell you when it's finished. But to begin with, what I want to do is give each of the 3 candidates who are here an opportunity to introduce themselves and for them to state why they are the best candidate and worthy of your vote. And so with that, I'm going to start at the other end with Andy Fogarasi. And Andy, if you would start, please.
Sure. I'm Andy Fogarasi, and I feel like I'd be a very good candidate for continuing on with my position for the next 2 years. It's very important to me to see that Volente remains strong against the growth that's going on around it. We've got BCRUA coming in from one side, we have growth coming in from Austin, and we have to maintain some unity in the city to be able to fend off some of these folks that are potentially encroaching on our beautiful little community. My background, I have an MBA from the University of Texas. I have an undergraduate in engineering from Texas A&M University. I'm an entrepreneur. I have started 3 of my own businesses. One of them was successful enough to allow me to retire a little early, as long as I manage my money properly. And it gives me some time to enjoy Volente, but also spend time giving it back, my time back to the community. My only goal, really truly, to be on council for the next 2 years is to finish what I started, which was working on the ordinances, which are now 13 years old and have, from what I have heard and what I have seen and personally felt, given people in the village a lot of trouble, a lot of difficulty navigating. They're cumbersome, they don't fit well, and we've begun replacing the ordinances. I worked with Christy and others in the previous years on the zoning ordinance, and I'm happy to say we have a new zoning ordinance in place. It got put in a little bit early. We had to fix it a little bit. Conditional overlay got left out, but our group here got that fixed. I want to continue. I want to get the the site development ordinances in there that are really critical for building and construction, and that's my pet project. That's my whole, whole true reason for really wanting to continue on council, is to finish what I started on the site development ordinances. That's it.
Okay, thank you for very efficient use of your time, Andy. Steve Baker, please.
Gee, what's left to say? Steve Baker, I live on West Drive. Just do a little background. So I started my career as a CPA and a business consultant, where I worked for a worldwide accounting firm doing business management consulting, financial consulting, operations type consulting. From there, I went on to be a chief financial officer for a real estate development firm and property management firm. Did that for a while until I decided I wanted to kind of do my own thing. So I, about 30 years ago, started a company that did business consulting and software, mostly for financial management, business management. We advised companies really all over the country for the last 30 years in how to run their businesses better, how to be more efficient with their operations, setting up business systems. Did that, developed our own software that did financial planning, budgeting, forecasting, that sort of thing. The company was quite successful, grew to be one of Austin's 25 fastest growing companies for 2 years in a row. And like Andy, I was able to retire young. Mostly, I kept a very small part of that company. I kind of sold it off in pieces. So I have a very small part left that I spend just, I don't know, a day a week still working with. I've lived in the Volente area for 4.5 years, lived around the Lake Travis area for about 35 years, and have owned Lake Travis waterfront property for about 18 years. So yeah, somewhat new compared to some of you that have been here for 30, 40 years. But certainly plan to spend the rest of my life here. Don't really have any financial interests here, other than just that I want to stay here for the rest of my life with my wife and our 3-year-old grandson that we're raising.
Okay, thank you. And Kit Hopkins, please.
Okay, I'll just say my name because everything's already been said. No, I'm just kidding. I'm Kit Hopkins. I'm also new to the village. I bought a house here in 2010 and finally moved here after retirement with Schlumberger after 29 years in 2014. I spent some time working in on the Finance Committee and on the Planning and Zoning Commission before I ran for office the last time. The reason I did that is the same reason I'm running for re-election, is that I fell in love with Volente, and it is a beautiful place. I love the rural, nature of it. I love the water, being close to the water, and and having 29 years in corporate life. Well, actually more than that, but I'm not going to go into that detail. That it's I find it satisfying to volunteer. I feel like I've been giving back to the community with that effort that I've been trying to make. The finances were a little bit shabby when I showed up, and first thing they said, here, reconcile that 4-year bank account or whatever. And so it's been a constant progress. I felt like I've accomplished something every time I set my mind to accomplish it, and it's all been for the love of the village, quite frankly. We did spend a lot of time on the zoning ordinance. We all have recognized, I believe, some fallities with the ordinances that we have. They don't fit. People get frustrated, and you read about it, you hear about it, and that's one of the reasons why I want to continue. I want to continue the effort of improving what we have and making it livable for everyone. And that's why I want to continue.
Excellent, thank you. And on behalf of the village, I just want to thank all three of you for a 2-year service that you have served on council. We've gone through a lot in those 2 years, and we've accomplished a lot. So with that, I'm going to start the questions again, 3 minutes to each answer. You've all been finishing early, so that's wonderful. We'll be very efficient tonight. But the first question I'm going to ask is a potentially controversial one. We were just talking as we came in tonight about Volente and a feeling that has kind of arisen in Volente, a feeling of divisiveness. It's a feeling that we're seeing across the United States right now in politics in general. But there has been a tool that we have used in Volente that is possibly contributory to that, and that is Nextdoor. Nextdoor is a great way to tie people together. I think we have 370 people signed up on Volente Nextdoor, but it also is a source of great frustration. So what I'd like to ask each of you to talk about is your views on Nextdoor. What could we do to make it more usable, more friendly, and less divisive? And so I'll start this time at this end. Kit, if you would start.
Oh, we all have an account. Some of us actually post on it a lot. Some of us don't. I'm one that doesn't because I'm not comfortable posting on it. And that's a shame because it is a community social network. I mean, I like to hear about the coyotes coming down the canyon, the low-flying plane, these kind of things. But some of the disrespect of individuals that are trying to do things positively for the village, or just the backstabbing that goes on, I find that very unsettling. This is not what I anticipated when I moved here, quite frankly. My community in Houston didn't have Nextdoor, so maybe this is common among Nextdoor communities. I don't know. What I think, I don't have a clear answer on how to fix it. Otherwise, I would have probably already brought it to council to try to fix it. I think that mutual respect. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. I learned that as a child. I continue to use it as an adult. I think as a community, this is a beautiful community. So why would we want to make it to where it's not inclusive for everyone? I don't understand it, I don't like it, and if I could shut it off tomorrow, I would. Plain and simple.
With that, Steve, do you want to take the next?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure, to tell you the truth, what to do to fix it. There's some things I'd like to try. About 3 months ago, I kind of started feeling the same way about that. It was just getting way too ugly, and I had so many people come up to me and say, hey, I don't participate in Nextdoor. I just am not going to risk getting attacked or bullied, or it's just not interesting, it's not fun, and I think it's a fantastic tool. I don't know how many of you out there, some of you, I recognize your faces, participate, but I think it's a fantastic tool for helping each other out, right? One of their main guidelines is be helpful, not hurtful. That kind of sums up their guidelines there. So as I talk to different people, what do we do? And So one idea I had was just, I learned through talking to one person that the mayor was involved in setting up Nextdoor. So I thought, well, maybe that's a good place to start. So I went to the mayor privately and just said, hey, I'm not sure what to do. I'm not sure that the leads are being active enough in kind of squashing some of the ugliness that happens. I don't quite know what to do next. And he suggested maybe we should have a meeting with the leads and kind of talk to them about it. And I said, well, God, that sounds like a great idea. So we started off kind of down that path of Ken and I trying to set up a meeting with the leads to just say, hey, what could be done? And for whatever reason, they've not agreed to meet with us, so it's kind of been stalled in going that direction. But I am glad that after that, the Leeds did, I think, make one good move, which was to take and form that kind of new, what would you call it, a thread, a new group for, hey, if you want to get ugly in politics, we're not going to censor you, go over here and do it. And that seemed like that's, that's not a perfect solution, but I think it did help move some things over. And I would like to see really, I think the Leeds still are kind of letting some bullying and things go on. For you who read Nextdoor, I participate a lot, and you might notice that a lot of times when people get kind of ugly, I tend to go out there and say, hey, can you kind of say that in a different way? Would you please maybe retract that? It's not accurate, it's mean. So I've done some of that, and I try to take the high road on Nextdoor, and some people may not agree with me that don't appreciate my the position that I'm in here. But I think it's probably, the last thing I'd say is it's got to be a community effort. I don't think the Leeds can fix it. I don't think I can fix it. But if we can get enough people who participate in Nextdoor, and when somebody does get a little bit out of line with the guidelines, that they actually say something, and rather than it just being one person going, hey, please don't be ugly, please don't call names. That if multiple people would kind of say that, then maybe those that tend to do that more than others would start to feel a little bit of public pressure.
Thank you.
My 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Andy.
All right. Well, my perspective may be a little bit different. Maybe it's a combination of the two. My background, my whole life has kind of been in a place where I've never been part of a group of people. I've never picked one side or the other. Interestingly enough, when you do that, one side says, well, you're not a part of us, so you must be part of them. And the other side does the same. So I find myself in kind of a lonely little place with my own little group of friends. Okay, that's my position. But it allows me to also sometimes pull people together, because that's really what I want to do. That's what I feel some of my position in life is, believe it or not, in some strange way, of getting people who have of different beliefs and trying to make both sides understand. My family background is European. I've traveled around the world. I speak multiple different languages, and it's something I truly love to do. I mean, I get goosebumps talking about it when I can get two people that have very different appearingly positions and actually get them to sit down and talk and be friends. I swear to God, that's probably one of my favorite things to do, to see two people get together and understand. That being said, some of the way that Nextdoor is being used right now, and I don't blame it on Nextdoor in the same way that I don't blame the incorporation of the city on people's behavior towards each other, which is often said around here. The reason people were so angry was because of the incorporation. No, it's not. Incorporation is just a thing. It's how people react to it. And unfortunately, if you want to say something interesting, Nextdoor appears to be more divisive than what the incorporation was. The pain and anger I feel on Nextdoor is phenomenal. I'm getting angry when I'm suddenly getting censored when I'm trying to communicate information. So, where do we go? This communication needs to happen. There's a void. That's why it's happening on Nextdoor, in my opinion. Robert had an interesting idea. Maybe it's something we should pursue. On our village website, maybe we need to have a forum on there, truly for political stuff, where people can get on and talk, kind of the way we've moved it off to one side on Nextdoor. And we should, on Nextdoor, be allowed to post references and say, this topic is being discussed. If you're interested, please go over here and participate. And you should even be able to go on Nextdoor and rally for your position. Hey, this topic, I feel it's important. I'm not going to go into detail on it, but please, anyone that's interested in it, come over here and join the discussion. But it needs to be, this political stuff needs to be removed, I agree, from the main line of Nextdoor, which is coyotes going down the road and airplanes flying over the lake, and could somebody tell me where there's a good plumber? And my time is up, but I think you get the gist of my idea.
Thank you, Andy. I think that the challenge to all of us, you as residents, we as council members up here, is to find a way to move beyond the divisiveness that's happening. and find a way for civil, open, respectful communication, realizing that everybody on council is there as a volunteer. We don't have paid staff. We're not paid council members. And as such, I'd love to see more of that respect between the council and the community. With that said, more in tune with kind of positions and views of the village of Volente, we crafted, when the community was incorporated back in 2003, there was a community survey that was done back there. There was a comprehensive plan crafted at that time. We're now working at updating that. I would be very interested in each of you articulating, if you could see Volente in 10 years from now, what do you see for that village of Volente in 10 years? How would you describe it? What might be the mix between residents and commercial? So with that, I'm going to start with you, Steve.
I moved here 4.5 years ago because I kind of like the way it is now. I like it quiet. I kind of like the night sky and being able to see it. I like all the trees. I like the mix of the old fishing cabins and the McMansions, if you'll call them that, kind of all being here. So how would I like to see it change? I would like to see it. I think the change is inevitable. A lot of people feel that, hey, we're at the end of a dead-end road and really not much is ever going to happen out here. I just can't really buy into that we have stuff going on all around us and people are buying, some relatives of ours, buying homes out in Liberty Hill and way out in Leander and places that are so far away from grocery stores and stuff because there just aren't any other places. So it's going to happen here. So my idea is that we just have to plan for it. I'm not into having a big entertainment district here. I don't think that should happen. I do like having restaurants, coffee shops, ice cream stores, boutique type stuff that is kind of tied to destination, waterfront, water parks, marinas, things that are related to that. But turning it into nightclub scenes out here is not anything I'd be interested in. I think what happens with Volente Peak is going to be a huge effect on where things go 10 years from now. And boy, that's been anything from being a hospital up there to being 300 homes up there. And right now we're on the edge of where it kind of could go in any direction if we can't work things out with the current owners because that whole PDD agreement will go away and we're kind of be starting over again. So there's just, I think, having expert planners to kind of help us with understanding how you have a place like this that does allow for commercial and destination type businesses, and along with it being also a bedroom community, is a way with with buffering zones between those things, and just designing the flow of the town to where it can handle a little 2-lane road that goes in and out of it, as well as preserve as much of what we have now into the future. I believe that we do need a site development ordinance and a zoning ordinance and some things that some other people in Volente seem to be challenging as to whether that should just be turned over to Travis County and LCRA and others to kind of let happen what will happen around here. But I would like to see Volente decide what happens around here and kind of keep our control here. As I say, we should improve our ordinances, make it better, not give our governance away to somebody else to decide how things go out here.
Thank you. Andy?
A lot in agreement with Steve. Volente is a special place. Housing is going up, as he said, all the way to Liberty Hill. I mean, it's crazy out there, 10 miles past here. And Bee Caves, construction is going out 620. 620 is populated with roads. If you've tried to go into town from Lakeway on 620 to turn right on 22, it's an hour plus wait. It's crazy. Our secret little spot which I don't believe is going to remain secret that much longer, allows us to go in on 2222 or Anderson Lane, and we get to sneak in when everybody else is backed up on 183 or 620 or wherever 10 miles past us. We have a beautiful place. This place is going to be developed, and it's going to be happening in the next years, I believe, next 10 years, because that was the question. But what's it going to look like in 10 years? What do I want it to look like in 10 years? I think that's the key point. And when I first bought my property out here in 1999, after being out here playing for 10 years before that, a friend of mine asked me why I purchased out here. And I showed him the road, and I showed him the place, and he got it. He's like, oh, Mount Bunnell Road. Go over the top of Mount Bunnell, come down the other side, and there's a winding road that goes right next to Lake Austin. It's downtown Austin. And there's a little bar there on the left side. A little lady that runs this place, and she'll chase you out of there if she doesn't like the way you behave or drink. I thought of VJ's. Same area. And that place is 10, 15 miles closer into town than here. But it kept its style, it's kept its beautiful homes, it didn't get overly populated. It's a wonderful place. I wouldn't mind having a restaurant or two. We're on the lake, a few amenities out here, but we got to be careful that something bad doesn't happen. Last year, on Nextdoor, a fellow that posted up Lime Creek Road, help me please, what do I do? My neighbor right next to me is going to make big bucks putting a cell phone tower on his property. He sold the rights to his property, the next door, to put a cell phone tower there. Lake Travis controls that district. The neighbor could do nothing. He now has a cell phone tower right next to his property, blocking his view up Lime Creek Road. There was no city, there was no community, and Travis County did nothing to come and help. I don't want to see that happen. I want people out here to be able to enjoy their homes, enjoy their views, a vision of Mount Bunnell Road, a little restaurant down here, and all the rest of Austin can be fighting their traffic on the outsides, and we can enjoy our little road sneaking into town with the only challenge of getting behind a slow truck every now and then.
Okay, thank you. Kit? Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just say it and get it over with. I'm not a big fan of commercial development. I think the same way Steve does, that a little grocery store, a little ice cream shop, a little bar, something cozy, nothing big. I don't prefer to see 1,000 people show up in my neighborhood on the weekend. That's not something I enjoy, or do I like experiencing it when I'm behind these huge buses going up and down 2769. I also agree with both of them that growth is going to happen. I drive 620 on occasion. I like to blow my brains out. Sometimes 2222 is really bad, because people are figuring out. They're all coming from Cedar Park and cutting up there. We have a 2-lane road. Some people are crazy enough to try to pass on the 2-lane road. I can't imagine having 300 homes, but with all that confronting us, I think we have to have a plan, a well-integrated plan on how we're going to attack these things. Maybe we need to talk about expanding roads. Maybe we need to be improving roads. Maybe we need to continue our process with looking at our land use ordinances. With another 300 people up the hill, we might have a water issue. We had a water issue 2 years ago, extreme. People's wells were going dry. We have we have no infrastructure to speak of other than our roads. We don't have really well-trained staff yet. We have staff, yeah, they've been in place for a year. That doesn't mean they're well-trained. That doesn't mean they can confront everything. From a health and safety standpoint, if we had to evacuate tomorrow, I'm not sure how I'd do that. I would probably try to find somebody with a boat to come pick me and my dog up to take me across to Jonestown. I don't know. So there are a lot of things as a village with 500 people in it, 350 homes maybe or something, that we should be attacking on a methodical basis. Make a list and just start getting them done, cross them off. Because if we don't do that, we're going to be caught blindsided. Somebody's going to come in here who has done this before elsewhere, and we're going to be confronted with something we don't want. And I've only been here a little while, but I've lived in Houston most of my life. I've lived in New Orleans, I've lived in England. I know what can happen in communities if you don't have a closely integrated plan and a tight-knit group. And we don't have a tight-knit group to carry this out. So that would be what I would think that we need to start improving on, quite frankly. And that's all for that.
Okay, thank you. So that's kind of a view, long range, articulated by the three candidates of where they can see the village going. Right now in the village, we have on an ongoing basis, every time that we meet, we wrestle with an issue that has to do with individual property rights versus community property rights. And for the most part, our ordinances are there to reconcile that. But that doesn't mean that we don't have conflicts within that. And I'll just use one example, and that is short-term rentals. We are a lakeside community, clearly. We have a lot of property on the lake, looking at the lake, and to some people that looks to them as a vehicle for renting out their property and making some money to let people use their property. That's an individual property right. To all the neighbors around them, you've got community property rights, especially if the rental goes bad and activities happen there that aren't acceptable. So with that, I'd like to just hear you articulate a little bit about your thoughts of that balance and how do you protect both the individual property right as well as the community property rights. And Andy, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. I'm going to use short-term rentals as an example. Sounds like a good place to start. Right now, on my property, I've got 3.5 acres. I'm building a shop behind my property, and I'm remodeling my house. And for the last year, my wife and I and my daughter have lived in a 26-foot-long Airstream trailer right next to our house, and that was an interesting experience. My shop is intended for my purpose to use as a shop, but it is heated and cooled. And if my retirement planning doesn't work out the way I need to, I may need to rent out that shop to someone to put in it. Now, I'd like to be able to do that, perhaps. I have no plans to. But what would be my rights, and what happens if I offend the rights of my neighbor? I think I should be given the opportunity to rent it out if I want to, and I think I should probably lose that right if I don't take control and watch over the people I'm renting it out to, and my neighbors are offended by noise and other things that the short-term rentals could bring. That I think is the issue. There are people that manage short-term rentals very well. They carefully watch over the people that come and make sure that it's not offensive. And there's other people that don't. So everyone should be given the opportunity to do what they want to with their property to the extent it does not offend their neighbors and those around them. And if it does, they should be able to lose that right too. So I don't know exactly how you do it, but I think along those lines would probably work. Some type of a permit, and if there are proven offenses, then you lose that permit. And that could be a way to balance. I like to give everybody the benefit of the doubt the very first time, but they also may lose it if they don't take care of that opportunity.
Thank you. Kit?
I guess taking the same, I think everyone has a right to use their property. I think people who have a residence on property, I think they should be able to enjoy that ownership and that property. Otherwise, they would move, right? So to have a short-term rental right next door that has, it's maybe a 3-bedroom house. It has 12 people show up every weekend that, we live at the lake. I mean, not everyone has 12-foot fences and things like that, so you can isolate yourself from obnoxious people. It's hard. It's hard to do that, and I feel bad for anybody that has to experience that. Short-term rentals can be good and they can be bad. as Andy says. We do have a permitting process here. We don't have a lot of enforcement, though. And one of the things I've noticed is that when you do have the 12 people show up on the weekend, and you have trash to pick up on Thursday, then you end up with like 14 cans in front of somebody's house waiting to be picked up. It starts looking very, very trashy because it just sits there and waits. And then when they get empty, they just sit there and wait for somebody to drag them back in. My father was really big on property rights. He was against zoning in Houston and all kinds of things. But unfortunately, not everybody has the same mind's eye view of what a community should look like, nor do they care, because they don't live here. They have bought property for investment. They're doing short-term rentals. They may not even have laid an eye on the individual staying in the short-term rental. I find that concerning to a certain degree. But on the other hand, a bed and breakfast where someone's close to the property, you see the people going through the door, you know who's staying in the property. It's usually not a group of 12 to 20 people, depending on the house size. I see nothing wrong with that. But it's the lack of control, and it's when I bought in a residential community, I didn't think I was moving into an apartment complex where it's just a rush of people and a lot of people all the time. And so I think that it is difficult to balance those property rights, but without enforcement and without being able to control what's happening, unfortunately, it's the person not trying to make the money that gets hurt, in my opinion. So that's all.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
Wow, really good questions, Ken. This one definitely doesn't have any black or white answers to it, and I don't know if you remember, but that was the exact same question I asked the candidates that were applying for appointment a few weeks ago. There's so many things I want to branch off into. I got squirrels all running around in my head. Okay, let me first kind of use it to make points, I guess. That's what I should do. So the points about should we have our own site development ordinance? Should we have our own ordinances, our own governance? And I believe that we should be able to control some of the things that control a person's property rights versus their neighbor's rights. Delicate balance. One of the things that another group here in town would like to do is say that, well, we don't really need a site development ordinance. Let's let Travis County handle that. And I don't know that Travis County and its 1.2 million citizens are really going to understand how Volente wants to balance between a property owner's rights and the person or people that live around them. I don't. I think we can understand that better. I also don't buy into their idea that LCRA can cover us on all sort of impervious cover issues. For instance, the group I'm talking about says, hey, we should just let them enforce impervious cover, for instance. Well, realize that impervious cover to the LCRA isn't enforced for any property that's been there before 1990 or is less than an acre, and we've got a lot of those. I kind of don't think we should just let anybody that's got a small lot be able to do concrete and driveway all the way to the edges of their lot and take down all the trees and all of the things we kind of like to preserve out here, to build a big mansion that takes up every bit of greenery on a lot. I don't think we should allow that if the lot was platted prior to 1990 and is less than an acre. We have plenty of those. Last thing I'll say, hope I get time, is this issue kind of came up in council this year, and I'll kind of tell you how I voted on it. It was an issue of, when we were doing our zoning ordinance, is to, if somebody had an older home and they had built the home where it crossed over the setback line, and they wanted to remodel, should we allow them to, let's say they're 1 foot off of their property line, should we allow them, because they are kind of exempted, they can still encroach on the setback, provided that, that house has been there since before and it was legal. So some people on council said, yeah, if they're 1 foot from the property line and they want to remodel their house, and their house right now is 1 story, go ahead and let them build it up to 35 feet high right there 1 foot off the property line. And I fought extremely hard for no. I think we should allow them to continue to encroach into the setback area because, guys, they've been there a long time. But I did not think they should be allowed to build something that was 35 feet tall that would be looking down in their neighbor's bathroom.
So it's a complex issue, one that I think ordinances are intended, or laws are intended to try and craft a careful balance between an individual property right and the community's property rights. That's what we continue to strive for, and look for help from the community in striking that right balance. Kit brought up a very good point, and it's one that we've wrestled with for I don't know how many years on council, but the word enforcement. The challenge for any community is, as you write laws, and in our case, ordinances, which are laws, is how do you enforce those? And what do you do when somebody doesn't adhere to those? We've wrestled in this village. We've had a little bit of both. One is code enforcement by having somebody go out and look and examine and find violations and post stop work orders, etc. The other is we have tended to use a complaint-driven system. And we're trying to balance the community desires along with our need, because the reality is, in one way or another, we need to enforce ordinances, however we do that. And so I'd like to have the candidates talk about what are their thoughts about what would be the best way for we, Volente, this small community, to enforce our ordinances. And I'm going to start with you, Kit.
Okay. I have given this some thought because we have been confronted with it a lot. The first word that comes to my mind is fairness. Whatever you do in terms of enforcement, it should be fair. I don't like the complaint-driven enforcement that we have because I think it pits neighbor against neighbor, and I don't think that's what we're trying to achieve in the village with all the decisiveness. You can, how does everyone else do it in communities? Well, they have a police department. We don't have one. But you can hire somebody to do that for you. I wouldn't even ask that the administrative staff do that kind of work for us. Because all it does is cause a bad taste in someone's mouth if they're asked not to do something by let's say, the city secretary, who has a lot of jobs that she's trying to take care of, not just enforcement, so it kind of diminishes the rest of her role in the village. I don't think the mayor should do it. I think it diminishes his role in the village as well. So we get somebody that can do it on an ongoing basis. And if it's complaint driven, it doesn't have to, most of the stuff doesn't have to happen in, a 30-second time period. No one's hopefully being murdered or something like that. We're talking about our regulations that are not being adhered to for whatever reason. And it takes usually more than, a day or two to figure that out anyway. So from my standpoint, it needs to be fair, it needs to be clear, and everybody needs to know that things are going to be enforced before it starts happening. It needs to be somebody independent and a contract person, probably outside of the village governance. That's what I think.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
Yeah, so I guess I'm kind of already on record with kind of how I felt about this. So just recently, I rewrote many sections of our administrative ordinance, which addresses kind of this issue. It's been presented to council, kind of been through some edits and about ready to be approved. And one of the sections that was added in there, and I wrote the section, was on enforcement through a complaint-driven process. I don't think complaints is the only way to enforce, I shouldn't say, I don't think the issue is how do we enforce our ordinances as much as it is how do we get people to follow our ordinances, and then after that, then enforcement happens, right? So it's, as I wrote into the admin ordinance, I think it's a process of education of the community, because I believe we're a small enough community that people pretty much want to do the right thing, and they know that they're going to know their neighbors and they're going to be here for a while. And if they know what the rules are and that their neighbors, support those rules, then I think people will pretty much try to follow them. Complaints work very well in a situation where somebody isn't aware of, oh, I didn't know you couldn't do that. And so a complaint goes to City Hall, and then a letter is written or a phone call is made, and that person is informed about what it is, and typically that resolves it. When I was kind of going through researching this, I asked our city secretary to research as back as far as she could. Can you tell me how many complaints have we had filed? And have we ever, what had been the resolution of those? And as it turns out, every complaint that she had record of, every one had been able to be resolved through the mayor calling them or somebody writing a letter, short of, maybe one. But they've all been able to be handled by citizens talking to citizens, people talking, discussing, and not having to escalate to anything that's more serious. And so I think, through 99% of the issues we run across, that we can follow this education, complaint-driven type system.
Okay. Andy?
To me, this appears to be very much a two-part issue. The very first part of the issue is the ordinances themselves. If they're simple, if they're clear, if any one of us can get on the website to the Village of Volente and read the ordinances without a lawyer having to interpret it for us, then we know what's acceptable and what's not. Also, it's very, very critical, and this is a strong point for me, that the ordinances have no room for question. Some people think it's nice to leave the ordinances a little bit loose. Oh, it can go this way, oh, it can go that way. All that does is bring the lawyers straight to the table as soon as one person interprets it one way and another person interprets it another. They need to be simple, they need to be short, they need to be very concise. That's in our village, and they need to be tailored to our village. Now, let's get to the other side, when there's a complaint, when there's an issue. And David Springer and Bill Connors brought up some interesting points to me in the past, which I tended to agree with or have trouble with. We all know each other. We don't want one of the other in our community coming and telling on us and coming and poking at us and telling us what we can't and what we can and can't do. They made the point that it's better to have someone at a distance who is impartial come and help us with those things. What do I mean by that? I don't mean that Travis County does all of our rules and enforcement, but we hire somebody who doesn't belong in the city, and that's the person that comes in, looks at our rules, doesn't know any of us, and is impartial in telling us if we're breaking the rules or not. Maybe they drive around every once in a while. I don't want anybody looking over my fence, but I'd rather be caught doing something or told doing something than having to have my neighbor, David or someone else, call down to City Hall and say that, hey, Andy's doing something goofy. Maybe David could come tell me that. That'd be better than stop. But it would be better if we didn't have to have someone inside of our community coming and telling us that we're breaking the rules. I don't know, that's a thought. I'm not absolutely firm on how we do that. I am firm on the first part of that. The ordinances have to be clear, concise, and no ambiguity in there. They're very clear. And that way the second thing doesn't happen as much.
Are you
Okay.
going to allow any sort of follow-up or anything on any of these with...
Well, you can ask for it, and I'll say no, but do you want to follow up?
like in a real debate, you kind of like get that 1 minute rebuttal sort of thing with...
To each other, kind of?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, exactly. So,
If
yeah,
do you
I
want a
just
minute?
like to-
If this is a subject,
1 minute, yeah, 1 minute.
then
So-
I'm going to give that opportunity to each of you. But yes, you each can have 1 minute. Start with you, Steve.
Okay, so Andy, I'm not quite so much for the enforcement person type of thing for really just one reason, so it'll be less than a minute. Because I think there's a lot of people who maybe aren't following the rules exactly, but that nobody really cares. And I think if you have like an enforcement type person, their job is going to be to find everybody that's breaking all the rules, as opposed to the ones that are where they're breaking a rule and it's actually maybe infringing on somebody else's rights. So I'd kind of lean more towards the, I realize it's kind of a negative that think that your neighbor's going to tell on you, but I think that negative maybe is even more negative if you've got somebody running around enforcing ordinances. So.
Okay. Kit, you want to, any comments?
Well, I disagree with Steve.
Okay.
primarily because I
Since we
think,
didn't have the other group of candidates here, we got to get a little
I
bit.
Okay.
I
This is
think,
controversial as you can, please.
well, please start my time over because he just used half of it.
That was intentional.
Ready, begin.
I disagree because I do think that if it diminishes the role of government to also make the rules and then try to go out and second guess everybody, and I do know human nature, it's easier to ask forgiveness than to ask permission. And if you think you have a chance in hell to actually bypass the system, there's a lot of people that will try to work the system in that direction. So unfortunately, I think that not somebody driving around in the car with an amber light on the roof and all that stuff and being a little militant about it, but I do think if somebody does complain, I don't think that I think an individual outside of the government should be doing that, not the mayor and not the city secretary, because it diminishes their position.
Okay. Andy, you get the final.
As I said, the second part of this, how we enforce it, was something I still struggle with. I think Kit did a nice job of saying, okay, however the complaint comes in, whoever goes out and investigates it is someone outside of the city. I don't know if that's rule. Boy, we could talk about how we enforce and what the repercussions of it are for quite a long time. But again, if the ordinances are clear and crisp on the front end and simple, that should reduce the second half.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask one final question, then I'm going to turn to the audience for questions. But and Kit had mentioned this before. She's has a lot of awareness of the questions I'm going to be asking, and you use those words. You did. That's right. But it is this balance on this community, being a lakeside community, 2 square miles, et cetera. We're trying to be kind of self-sufficient, and it's this balance between residential living and some commercial activities. And I'd like to see if the three of you each could articulate. I think everyone knows on the residential side and the privacy side and 1 acre lots, et cetera, but what are the essential commercial activities or services? So again, it goes back to just see if you could articulate your vision of a suite of services, commercial services or amenities that you'd like to see in the village. So with that, I'm going to start with Andy.
Okay, we're Lakeside. This has been a party spot for many years. Some of you folks see me down at Beachside Billy's, eating a burger, drinking a beer, bringing my friends down there. I enjoy to go down there. I think that's something we should have. I'd like to have some more of it. I'd like to have a little office complex where if I do have to figure out how to go back to work and make some more money, I can do it from a place here away from my home, because when my beautiful 8-year-old daughter and wife are there, it's hard to get some stuff done. But those are my own personal things and personal views. I could see us having some amenities for the community and a few interesting amenities that bring in moderate people from the outside, but Groon Hall that's not it. If we've got cars parked up and down the sides of the street and we can't make it to our homes, it's gone overboard. But yeah, it would be nice if we didn't have to leave our community to go see a dentist, and if that's even feasible, if there's enough business out here, go for dinner, go for lunch, have a coffee shop, and maybe even a little shop, a little art studio. I like that idea, but not a destination for hundreds of tourists to come to or thousands of tourists to come to on a weekend. And even though Kevin Fowler came a few weeks ago, and I know him personally, that was getting close to, but it was handled well, getting close to bigger than we needed to be. But I still like the idea. It didn't affect me. I'm up Lang Creek Road, but got to keep our community small, keep it for ourselves and our guests and friends, and not have Groon Hall.
Okay, Kit.
Okay, what I would like to see, small restaurants, we have them. Pizza parlor would be good. Coffee shop, small grocery. In terms of large entertainment venues, once in a while, wouldn't be too bad as long as it didn't get overboard and we didn't have a ton of buses and 30 people per bus getting off and hanging around for too long and causing havoc. But having a tourist destination where it happens 24/7, 7 days a week, where I get no relief to enjoy my property and neither does anybody else, absolutely not. I'm absolutely against that, 100%. I think that if we do that, we lose what we like about Volente, which is the calm, the beauty, sitting on your porch looking at the sunset. Well, I like to sit on the porch looking at the sunset with a glass of wine and a little bit of peace and quiet. I like to hear the birds. Banging the bass drum is not something that appeals to me for hours on end, and I do get confronted with that a lot. Jaws is another example. I thought that was a bit over the top. Maybe if that was one weekend, 2 nights maybe, I could have lived with that. I didn't complain, but it became exhausting. And unfortunately, I did pay money to live here. I bought my property. I keep it up to date. I do what I need to do, but I don't get to enjoy it because somebody else wants to make money off my back. I don't like that. So small, convenience, I like. I don't want a whole bunch of people coming in from outside and taking over my area.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
Again, great questions, Ken. Again, all the squirrels, like so many things I want to say. So I will say that commercial development helps all of us in one sense, hurts us in another. In one sense, the city of Bee Cave. Look at all the retail they have there. Do you know that they have like the lowest tax rate in all of Travis County in Bee Cave? Why is that? Because they brought in all this retail there. It reduced all the property taxes for everybody that lives in Bee Cave. So there's benefit to it, but then, there's some downside to it. When I picture what is more fitting of Volente, I see Wimberley more than I see Green. Green has, more of entertainment, outdoor music type venues. Not saying that those don't belong here, just saying they have a lot more of them there. Want to make sure I say to Adam, I don't know you real well yet, but I love what you've done with Beachside Billy's compared to what it was before. You've brought in a bunch of sales tax revenue that we weren't necessarily getting before that all helped us with keeping our taxes down. And from everything I've heard from our city secretary and others, you've been so willing to, whenever there's an issue, hey, come talk to me about it. I want to work it out with you. And I'm actually glad you're here and really like what you've done and hope you keep on. And I'm really excited about VJs. Really liked seeing that we helped them get that rezoned so they could bring VJs back. Andy came up with the idea of, hey, maybe we should try to put some kind of restriction on them, and maybe that restriction should be that they actually put in there what they say they're going to put in there. So yeah, I would like to have a coffee shop, a grocery store, what was the other thing we said we said if we'll rezone this provided that you'll agree that you'll at least have these 3 types of businesses in there. What was it? Restaurant, ice cream shop. No, not ice cream shop. Yeah, coffee shop and grocery store. So those sound fantastic. Restaurants are fantastic. 2 o'clock in the morning, loud music venues, I don't think fits Volente very well. But certainly with having 60 commercial zone properties here, we're going to have some commercial stuff come in. And certainly if we plan well, we buffer well, so have somebody who really understands this sort of thing help advise council in how you design your zoning so that when you do have businesses that might be offensive to neighbors, that we've done a good job of having, different types of commercial zones that allow different types of businesses that keep the softer, easier ones closer to the residents and the ones that aren't as complementary to residents further away on the water, for instance.
Okay, thank you. So with that, now I'm going to give you all an opportunity to ask questions. What I would ask you to do is, as you raise your hand and I'm acknowledging you, articulate your question and state, is it a question for just one person, or is it a question you want each of them to answer? And I'm going to shorten it a little bit, about 2 minutes then for answers, to give more of you an opportunity to ask some questions. So you understand, you've got a question, you articulate the question, say if you want one person to answer it, or if you're wanting all three of them to answer it. So
So Ken, are you going to have, is this to go on for how long, or is there a
I'm
certain
going to
number
manage
of
time.
questions?
It'll
or-
be probably a little bit after 8 when we'll end.
Okay.
Okay, so no, it's not meant to go on ad infinitum.
Didn't mean to seem
As long as council went
uncooperative.
last
Yeah, it won't be till,
Just get the ground rules.
Two nights in
Yeah.
a row is a little much, I think.
so with that, who would like to ask a question of the candidates? Oh dear God in heaven. Joyce, there's a lady in the back that would like to ask a question. Yes.
In fact, I have two questions, if I could ask two questions. And so my first question is to Steve. I really like what you said about educating the community, you know, about the ordinances. How would you go about doing that?
Well, when I was the chair of the safety committee, and we kind of came up with some general plans, you know, for evacuation and such. That issue came up. How do we educate the community, both with the Firewise program we were putting in place, as well as this evacuation plan? And the idea was to have a community event, and we're still kind of planning to have that. We had to wait till the summer season got over, but getting everybody together and having it focused around something that's fun so people will come to it, but then have the focus be, we want you to be aware of the following things. Of course, Nextdoor is, again, a fantastic tool for that sort of thing. You know, sending out things through the mail does tend to get expensive. Council, not this year, but the year before, we came up with the idea that we really wanted to upgrade our website to be a lot more interactive, a lot more help to the citizens. That too is going to be something that takes planning and money, but it's there in our top 10, top 20 goals that we had,
Top 10.
that could be a great tool for education also.
And if I can ask my second question,
Yep.
because it's to all three.
Okay.
And the question is, when divisiveness comes up in the community, when there's bitterness and negativity, toxicity, you know, what have you done, you know, since you've been on council, and what would you do differently, you know, about connecting with the community? You know, so it's like we hear it all in the background, but how do you as council members reach out to the community when you know there are issues? How do you do that?
Okay, let's start with Andy.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank God.
It's like, yeah. I think it's important.
It is, that's a good question.
The big issue is communication. It's truly all around communication. And the challenge is, my previous business, last business that I owned, was a technology business, and it had to do with e-commerce. And what I watched was that when people were communicating through some sort of electronic method, email or other, they would go from peaceful, happy to, I'm worried the guns are about to come out, that fast. That doesn't happen when you're face to face. I don't know what happens. There's a different mechanism when people are talking face to face. They don't go zero to explosion in the same way. We got to communicate. We got to get people face to face. Okay, those are the fundamentals. How do we do that? How do we have events? In previous years, some previous councils, there were some events. There was, my daughter is important to me. There were some Easter events, things put on. We used to have the Olive Fest. I'm not sure what olives had to do with Volente, but I thought it was cool. If we could somehow truly have events, more events that brought people together and somehow had some groups and teams that built things and worked on things for the community, I thought that would be helpful. My initial belief in what have I done, which was part of that, boy, I thought we could go build some parks and trails and we could walk together and talk to each other and drink a beer or a glass of wine, and I'm being told to stop. But boy, I thought if we met each other on the trails with dogs and cats on a leash and our children, that would bring the community together. I haven't been able to achieve that with a lot of effort. I failed.
Wendy.
That is a tough question, Joyce. I will say that I probably have not done a very good job. I had a very stressful job in Schlumberger. So I was hoping that retirement, I wouldn't have to be confronted with some of these issues that as a council person and looking at what's on next door and the decisive, I didn't even imagine that this beautiful community would be this way, to be honest. So I'm a little shocked. What I agree with Andy that community events, it's real easy to get behind a keyboard and type something in rashly that may offend somebody, whereas you might change your words if you're standing right in front of them. I've tried, at least, I hope I've succeeded in trying to be very diplomatic and respectful of the others and tried to stay out of the fray. Maybe as a council person, I'm not supposed to do that, but I really don't know how to participate in that kind of confrontation. It's not what, I'm a volunteer. I'm trying to help. I'm not trying to hurt. And I'm trying to look at the community overall, the majority viewpoint, and trying to, through my work on council, put those things forward. I'm not trying to push my own agenda. I don't have my own agenda. I'm trying to, so I don't really have an answer for you other than I don't know how to participate in that activity.
Steve.
Yeah, I agree with Andy that it's the face-to-face stuff, and I'll just kind of give you 4 real-life kind of stories. I think I got 4 of them, of situations. So there's, let me think, the first person that I kind of didn't see eye to eye on many things was Bill Connors, and that was back when I was first on council, and I asked Bill if we could go to lunch together, and we did. And we spent about a 2-hour-long lunch talking through a bunch of stuff and found we had a lot of common ground, some things that weren't so common. It didn't necessarily bridge the total gap, but I can say while I was working with him on council after that I think he and I had a much better relationship and could talk an awful lot of things through much better. One of the things he said to me at that lunch was that he wasn't so sure he wanted to be incorporated, and I've never gotten in line with him behind that idea, but on many other things he did. Bill's done a lot of great things for our community. Another person right after that was David Springer, was really hard on me on Nextdoor an awful lot. And I agreed to meet face-to-face with him at Town Hall, and we spent some time talking through some issues, found some common ground. He even told me a few times, he said, wow, that's the same way I feel about that issue. And so we did find some common ground. We haven't become best friends, and actually he's still continued to be kind of hard on me on Nextdoor from time to time, but I felt like that was an important step towards helping a little bit with somebody who's been on council before and trying to have that relationship. Who else? Curtis Radica is another one that I don't see eye to eye with, and says a lot of things on Nextdoor that I don't agree with, and so I did try contacting him through private messaging and tried to set up a personal phone call with him to talk through some of the things. One of the things he said on Nextdoor was that the only way he'd run for city council would be if it would be behind a platform of disincorporating the village, and so I tried to talk to him. He refused to talk to me at that time about that issue. I think he would talk to me now. He said so much, but we have yet to connect and talk.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Other questions? Adam.
Thank you. I guess some of you have known me for a little while. I've been coming out here since 1997 when we first moved to Austin. And I wish I could have talked my wife into buying property out here back then, but again, we were just starting a family, and closest grocery store was 183 in Lake Creek Parkway, or Lakeway, which was too far for her, which is why we didn't even move to Steiner Ranch at the time. We only had one little stop sign. We ended up moving into the Westwood District. But now that I've been here really nonstop for 5 months, working 18 hours a day, Met a lot of great people. And what you guys are saying and what I've heard from supposedly the other side is almost identical. It's the same stuff. Everybody here really wants kind of the same things. But I've heard the word fair mentioned a lot when we talk about individual rights and property rights. And Kit mentioned that she couldn't enjoy her property because someone trying to make money off her back, which I'm assuming is me. So I would like to know, I love music, but I also understand the noise, which is why we made sure every day it was under the noise ordinance. We made sure we had the sheriff's there at 85 decibels or lower. That was the highest it ever was that one day. So what is fair for me to have outdoor amplified music when there's 365 days a year? What's fair in your minds?
Do you want to ask each of them?
Yeah, I would like to hear from each of them.
Okay, so I'll start with Steve.
Well, I really don't know, because the night that you had the loud music that I heard people complaining about, I didn't hear it. So I don't have much of a personal stake in that one. I would more, I think, defer it to the people that were more affected by that than what my opinion was.
But I should say, if there's an ordinance and we're abiding by it, then what's fair? I want to be fair too. I'm not having 365 days a year of noise, and I don't want that any more than you guys do. It's overwhelming. Planning that thing was overwhelming. But what is a fair number for me to work towards? And I'm fine sitting down with the neighbors. I mentioned it before. Nobody seems to want to do that.
I like what you said.
I will.
Yeah, I will.
If you can come to the table and come up with something fair, I'm happy to listen. Because I had 5 days of outside amplified music.
So we're still,
Still, Steve. I liked what you said in your Nextdoor post, where you went through that you were validating that you weren't over the noise levels, that you were stopping the music at 10:30, I believe it was, that you said that you were doing, that you were only going to do it a few days out of the year, and all that seemed fine to me. I had no issue with the things that you said that was what your plan was. I can tell you what I don't want, and I wouldn't want a place that was every single weekend playing loud music outdoors. I wouldn't want that. A few times a year where it shuts off early and it's not too loud, I think that's fitting.
Andy?
Okay. For me to say my personal opinion is kind of like trying to explain what someone, pardon me, that has had cancer feels like. Not that cancer has anything to do with music, but I don't live in the vicinity of your music like Steve, so it doesn't bother me. So it's hard for me to say what my opinion is. However, here's what I would be willing to do. I would be more than willing, since I'm that in-between person that really likes to get people together and figure things out, help sit down with you and other people in the community, knowing there's no way that you're going to agree on everything. But I would be absolutely willing to sit down and try to figure out some specific rules that everyone agrees to, for the most part, so that your rules are clear and they're clear to everyone else. I could foresee, envision, even though I can't, I'm not there, that it has to do with how late the music is played, on what days it's played. I do have an 8-year-old daughter. I could understand if my neighbor's shooting off fireworks or playing loud music past 8 o'clock, I would have issues with that. But again, I have some ideas, but I think my benefit could be willing to sit down and mediate between folks. I don't know if it would work or not, but I'm more than happy to try.
Good answer, Andy.
Kit?
When I said wouldn't want anybody 24/7, 365 days a year, that I think everyone would agree that no one wants to have that all the time. What's fair? I think you've started to be fair with your approach to your business. The fact that you cut off your music at 10:30 at night. I think when you're not there, your music is louder than when you are there. I will say that. I would also venture to say that the fact that you have a lot of outsiders come in, and you have a business. I understand that, and you have a right to make money in your business, but this is predominantly a residential community, and I think you realize that too. So I'm sorry if it came across that I was picking on you, but you are the biggest commercial business in Volente. Okay. And I don't complain. I just call your office or call the woman who's behind a telephone number, and I say, look, you're giving me a headache. Could you please turn down the bass? And it's actually done, which is quite remarkable as well. I've never called the sheriff's department. I've never done anything like that against you in your business. But I will tell you, I'm concerned because you are a profit-generating business, and you are energized. You are energized. That's the goal. But you are energized to generate profits. And to do that, you're going to stay active in these venues. And where I live, that's going to have an effect on my life. You had your venue when I had family in. I have family come in twice a year from Montana. So that was the weekend that my family came. And I had to cancel my plans here in Volente because of your venue.
Thank you all.
Sure.
Next question. David.
I'm David McClellan.
Wait, just pause a minute because there may be an announcement.
We censored you, sorry.
Okay, right back to you, David.
I'm new to the community, David McClellan, for those who haven't met me. Like Adam, I have been struck by there seems to be more similarities between the two groups of candidates than differences. A lot of it seems to center around the ordinances, which, as I understand it, 13 years ago we applied some ordinances that perhaps don't apply very well and fit us very well. I know Andy's working on trying to rewrite those, but I'm curious to get each of the candidates' sort of vision for, because the devil's in the detail in this, what do you think the ordinance should look like? What should be there, what shouldn't be there? Can you add a little bit of, at least a skeleton to that so that we can understand what your vision of the end product might be? Because I think that's going to be really important.
Okay, with that, I'm going to start with you, Andy,
Okay.
because you are knee-deep in ordinances
I
right
am.
now.
First of all, one of the going back to Mr. Sperlin, and I apologize, Scott, thank you. He nailed it on the head several months ago when I was listening to him. It just kind of summed up what I was feeling. We have a super small office in Volente. We have one administrator and a part-time helper now that just came on board. There is how much can we administer? A very small amount. And what's our purpose? Our purpose, in my opinion, from reading the comprehensive plan and reading the survey, is that we want the absolute minimal that's required to have a safe, happy, healthy community. That means people that want to build their houses, they need, and they don't have any building experience, they want some guidelines to help them make sure that the steps are gone through properly so that when their house is built and they're getting ready to move in, the walls aren't going to fall off. Some of the ordinances, although they're not a building guide, they can help assure that there is some, that you use qualified people, engineers and such, that are electrical engineers and construction people that have permits and are licensed, and that specific checks are done at the home at various stages to make sure it's done properly. And the role of the community in those ordinances in the city hall is to guide individuals through that. Truly, it should be helping the people, not hindering. It should be something when somebody's building their home, they can go to city hall and go, I want to do this. How can you help me? Great, here's the ordinances. Follow these rules, follow these steps, and if you pick the right people, you'll end up having a good outcome. That's it.
Okay, Kit?
Well, we're talking about site development. Every city has a site development ordinance. How ours was put together, which was almost, how many pages? 300 pages or something? 280 some odd pages. Yeah. Was cobbled together by taking bits and pieces of various communities' ordinances. That probably wasn't a good plan because there's no integration when you do that. There's no logical path through an ordinance like that. It got very confused, and then it started being administered incorrectly. Engineered site plan, for instance, everybody needed one. Everyone doesn't need one. That was never the intent of the ordinance, and that we have changed. I think the main thing with a site development ordinance is that it's kind of like a handbook. How do you get your property developed? Yes, there are some rules. Yes, but there are rules. Do you have international building code that you have to follow anyway? So that's one of the things that was always set kind of to the side of our site development ordinance. We're actually now putting that inside our site development ordinance, and it's being reduced. I mean, there's a lot of confusing. I mean, residential versus commercial. You couldn't tell which one you were doing in reading the site development ordinance. Am I supposed to do that? Oh no, that's just for commercial. Well, it didn't say that. So, consistent, concise handbook. If you're a resident, you know what you need to do. If you're a commercial business, you know what you need to do, and it doesn't need to be 280 pages.
Steve.
So I assume you're talking about site development ordinance and maybe a little bit of zoning ordinance when you're asking about, what we would do different or with them or what needs to be fixed. So council has done some of the low-hanging fruit. There's still quite a bit left to go. Over the last year, Kit mentioned, just fixing that thing with not everyone needing an engineered site plan that could cost $20,000, $30,000. That was a great help. Going through and doing the zoning ordinance where we greatly reduced the restrictions on impervious cover and setbacks, where we cut back the number of variances that were needed over this last year by 90% compared to the average for the previous 3-5 years or whatever it was. We codified our ordinances over the last year, which took all of our ordinances, cross-referenced them all against each other, eliminated the discrepancies, the conflicts, cross-referenced them on a web page where now you can go to the village website, and instead of digging through hundreds and hundreds of pages of stuff and downloading PDF files, you can go and actually search all of our ordinances just through typical a web search engine, which has made it much easier. So I think the key of things that are left, like I said, those are kind of low-hanging fruit that we've attacked, is, as Andy was saying, make it simpler. So a builder's packet, I believe, has been built, and I haven't seen that, but one of the key things wasn't so much sure, there's a lot of broken stuff in our ordinances, but people were getting really messed up on being able to get through them with not knowing where to go when and what applied to them, and having to read through stuff to figure out how to deal with our ordinances. So we created this builder's packet. I don't know, maybe it's great and solved all those problems of people navigating our ordinances. Yes. But then the last thing I think I'll say is, a difference between us throwing away our site development ordinance and just letting Travis County do it all, like some others say, is that we need to have staff here who knows our ordinances well and can walk people through the process, because we really had some missteps, like with the Golds property, where we just didn't quite follow the processes right and caused them to, not because the ordinances were screwed up, but because we just didn't handle the process right. So getting trained and adequate support personnel to help people get through the ordinance.
I think both you and Andy.
I'd like to rebut that.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
First of all, on the Golds property, it wasn't a process. It was an understanding of what the words meant. And it was a comprehension issue. That's my feel. Because I sit in
there were a lot of deadlines that weren't met as we went through that our city staff didn't know about. That's what I meant by the process.
Well, you weren't very clear on that. Anyway, anyway, that was a bad example of a subdivision. But how many times have we done a subdivision? Number one, and we have issues that we've carried on for years. Our city attorney, our city engineer isn't even an engineer. He works for an engineering firm. So there's a lot of things. There's a long laundry list of things that need to be changed in this village to get it to where it runs smoothly, where you can pick up a 10-page document and figure out how to build on your land. I put the builder's packet together. Why? Because I built a garage. And in doing so, every time I do something, they go, well, no, you need to do this. So I wrote it down. Okay, you need to do this. So I wrote it down. You can't find it anywhere in the ordinances, but you have to have all these things. So I made the laundry list so people could have a piece of paper and go away and actually execute building something on their property. And that's the kind of ordinance we need to have.
One critical piece I became very passionate about over the last 2 years on these ordinances was the builder's packet. And I want to explain this in an analogy that makes complete sense. If anyone out there has done any software development or even has used a website, behind the scenes, what the programmers write is code. Code is what we call the ordinances. Code. That's the nasty stuff that's behind the scenes that you don't see. When you're dealing with a website, what you see is the front end. It's an interface. Here's a button that says click here, put your name here. You're not seeing the code, the software code in the background. That's a lot of the way the government code works. There's the code in the background. Out in front, in pamphlets and brochures, the builder's package is the code translated and organized in a very simple fashion for anyone to come in there and pick up a packet. It's not the same as the code, but it's absolutely based on the code. It is the code translated to the user interface for the person. That's something we've worked on too, and that is fundamental. Doesn't matter how good the code is in the background. What you really need is, when you come into the office, to be able to pick up that 1 or 2 or 3 sheet builder's packet that tells you the pieces that have been pulled out of the code that are most critical for you to follow when you're building your house. Both of those ends have to be there, the code and the front end.
Christy,
So maybe
Then
I've
I'll
got
get-
it on
I'll
my
come back
mind.
there next. Yeah,
Because
go
it's
ahead.
the end of the year, so I'm doing my employees' performance reviews, and I've got to do my performance review. So we always talk about at work of not just activities. It's all, you can have visions and ideas and activities, but I always say, what's your results? And that's what my boss is going to say too. I can do a whole bunch of things, but what were my results? So in evaluating your 2 years that you had and us making a decision if we want to re-up that 2 years, a couple of things that y'all brought up that you said were important in either your opening statement or in your comments were communication with citizens, and also a long-term plan for growth. So can you talk to us about what have you done specifically from a results standpoint over the last 2 years regarding a long-term plan for growth and communication with citizens as a council? Not individually like you were talking about, but as a council.
Okay, and you want each of them to respond?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I'm going to start with Steve.
Long-term growth and, I'm sorry, what?
Y'all said long-term plan for growth was one that was important, and then you also said communication with citizens.
Communications, thank you, yes. Boy, I will admit, council has done a horrible job over the last year with communications. You did a good job.
And I didn't pick that because I just picked that because you said that. That was not planned. I just wrote that down. Y'all said that was important.
Sucking
so.
up.
Well,
sucking
it's
up.
just
do not bring that
but
up.
it's a valid point. I'm not going to defend Roe through any of this. I'm just going to say it didn't happen.
And let me rephrase it. It's not necessarily just doing newsletters and stuff, but you had talked about building the bridge between the council and community. That was, I think, what y'all were talking about, was repairing maybe some of the tension between council and the communities. I wasn't necessarily talking about newsletters and stuff like that. Y'all were talking about just communicating with citizens just in general.
Well, it's probably still kind of the same thing, right? We didn't have newsletters, we didn't have community events, we had lots of things that were budgeted for that were just not done. We, I think, now have a much more vivacious, outgoing person in charge of that area. That I think we're going to see a lot more activity in community events, communication, that whole area that we've done so badly at before. Regarding the long-term growth plan, we did not do a great job of reconciling what we were doing with what is in our comprehensive plan. Boy, that comprehensive plan is a monster, and we kind of decided, as I was saying earlier, go after the low-hanging fruit for stuff that really needs fixing, and now we're kind of back to, okay, are we reconciled to what's in the community survey? Are we reconciled to what's in our comprehensive plan? So council budgeted $25,000 to hire a consultant to help us redo the comprehensive plan so we can kind of get after that long-term plan.
Andy.
Okay. Long-term growth. We didn't do enough on long-term growth, but at times when you're bleeding, you got to address the wound. And the wound that we saw immediately was that we got builders' problems, the builders' packet, the ordinances that are unclear, and people are feeling pain, money's being spent, and there's a lot of. We wanted to attack that as quickly as possible. However, my dream, Parks and Trails, where we could talk to each other long-term, communicate. Everyone spends a lot of time on council, but I went down and I fought hard for, I think, our biggest asset that the community owns, which is Mulberg Park, well, should own. $500,000 million piece of property. By itself, it's more valuable than all the money that we have in our total fund. And I see those kind of places in our parks and trails as places where we can meet and where we can build our future and communicate, because I want to get face to face. Spent a lot of time. I went down to the commissioner's court and fought hard to have it delivered to us. I got the newspapers out here to try to fight for that so we could find a place where we could, meet and greet. As for communications in general to the community.
You should be a lawyer. You did a great job at that presentation to the commission.
I fought, man! I was angry. Okay, real quick. We failed on communicating with people. Roe was struggling. I could have stepped up and helped him. I was busy with other things. I didn't. We failed to communicate so many good things we've been working on that were for the benefit of this community that we put our hearts into. We failed there on that part.
Upset. Kit?
I think we attempted some of the long-term planning with the change of the zoning ordinance. I think we helped the community in terms of setbacks, impervious cover from a residential standpoint. I think we went too far on the commercial side, but that's my opinion. In terms of communication, we did not have the community events that you bring up. Okay. We had several meetings. I mean, I will tell you, we did more than just one council meeting a month. It was a lot of grind, a lot of meetings to get some things done. Builder's packet, we did BCRUA, RFQ, there were city attorney RFQ, there were a lot of things, there was a lot of change put in place. If you want to call it not long-term, I think changing the city attorney is a long-term process. I think making sure that we have support for BCRUA from a legal and engineering standpoint is a long-term goal that needs to be there for more than a year or two. I think that hiring a new city secretary that can actually grow in the job and actually perform well, it was a long-term goal, and I think we've done that, and now we have a little sidekick that can help with the overload. I haven't met her yet, but I understand she's good. It seems like they talk longer than me.
Guarantee they didn't.
Okay.
Well, Michael, I heard somebody say the other night, well, we need to develop downtown Volente. I never thought of a downtown Volente. Do we have that? Do you have a vision for a downtown Volente? Andy?
Is that your question?
Just to Andy or all of them?
We'll have each of them.
Just call them out.
We'll start with Kit.
Oh, thanks a lot, Ken.
You got to start with Andy because she called him down.
I'll take all the time, okay. Downtown Volente, I think what was being referred to, and it's been brought up in a lot of meetings, is to where is our city center? Okay, we don't really have one, we have two. One is here where we are and across the street, which is VJ's, which is not running right now, but that's a vision of people. And then the other one is down at Beachside, Billy's, Highland Lakes Marina area, and that would be another one. In terms of what's logical, we don't know because we haven't hired our planner to work with our Planning and Zoning Commission to actually determine what is the right approach. And every time we try to hire one, it's too much money. So we're trying to do this on the cheap, so we're not really making a lot of progress. I think it could be either place. We also don't have a place for City Hall yet. That's up in the air. And you kind of like, you know, a little proximity to, you know, these kind of things. And there's no sidewalks. I mean, it's kind of hard to view this without some help from outside.
You sure you don't want to say any more?
No, I'm good to let it go. I'm good to let it
You're just
go.
good to let that one go?
I'll
Okay.
let it go.
Steve?
Yeah, I think we talked about this, you know, a little bit already when we were talking about what's your kind of vision for the commercial areas and such earlier. I agree with everything Kit was saying. We got kind of two city centers. I think that's what somebody was talking about when they said, you know, develop, probably, they're saying develop downtown Volente. There has been talk in the past of people wanting to do multifamily or condos or something like that, kind of more towards that end of town. And this council has been 100% against anything like multifamily or condos that would be a city center sort of a thing. I think the city center is really more around what we talked about with having waterfront activities, the water park, the restaurants, the things that we're hoping that VJs will be developed into, and all of that would be somewhat of a city center and really more of nothing that you would picture as a downtown.
Andy?
When I think of downtown, even in the smallest terms, I'm thinking of the Georgetown Square, courthouse in the center. You walk around it. That's a nice area with restaurants and shops and stuff. I still don't even see that in Volente. That's too much. So downtown, it's hard. No, there's no downtown. Is there an area where there's a little street where maybe the city hall is located, where maybe there's some shops and a coffee shop and a few places where if any of us are at home and we just feel like we want to go talk with our neighbors, where we can go to a place, and there's several locations where we could be VJs and a couple of other things around it. That's about as close as I see to a downtown that we would ever come to. But how many shops is there? I don't know. Is there any traffic lights? I don't think so. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
All right, so since you're all incumbents and you spent some time serving the community, first, what specific action is it that you've done during your tenure that you are most proud of, or that you feel was the most effective, positive thing that you've done for the community? And the other one is, if there was one thing that you could have done differently, what would that be?
That's a good, challenging question. Thank you. So I'm going to start with Andy this time.
My challenge is I have so many things that are unfinished. That is the biggest challenge ahead of me. Parks and trails are not done, and I'd like to actually succeed there. The ordinances, the site development ordinances, I'd like to get those fixed. A lot of work done on all of those. But actually for accomplishment, P&Z started with the zoning ordinance. It was then handed over to the council that we sat on with Christy and Bill, and we worked sometimes twice a week for hours. I worked side by side with Christy and stole food from her as we as we were working on this stuff. And we polished and cleaned. I think it got voted in a little too soon. It wasn't quite ready because we had to go with this council and clean a few pieces of it, but it went into place. And now, as Steve pointed out, variances, which have been an issue and a plague to everyone for years, went down to 1 this year. I wish I had accomplished more. If I can finish some of what I'm working on and have all these kind of pieces I'm pushing across the board, I think I can get a lot done. But that's the only one that's, I think, completed. A lot of other things moving.
Okay, Steve.
You've been a person that hires before, haven't you, with that question? That's a great interview question.
I've given over 200 interviews to software developers. I was thinking maybe you might call me out, like, hey, it sounds like a Scrum retrospective.
Yeah, so for the thing I wish I could have done better, I think I could have done better getting out and getting in the community, talking to people. Like to make excuses for how busy life is, but certainly I have not done a great job of really getting out there and talking with as many people as I probably could to hear what people have to say. On the side of things I've accomplished, the biggest thing I can think of would be, in the Finance Committee, Our roads have been something, it's our biggest item that we have in our budget, is to maintain our roads. And we've kind of been where some years we spend the money, some years we don't, some years we tax to repair the roads and then we don't spend it and it goes into the general fund. It's just kind of been this up and down thing with how we're taking care of our roads without ever there being a long-term plan in place. So we got a engineer hired that did a study that ran out for 24 years on what all of our road costs would be, what the way would be, the service, the things we would need to do to maintain those costs to keep them the lowest, and then also price it all out over that 24 years to figure out what the average would be so that we didn't get some big surprise 5 years or 10 years down the road from now where we had to say, oh gosh, we got a huge bill on roads that we didn't plan well for. So we created a special revenue fund and a road maintenance fund. We're collecting now some sales taxes that we got away from Capital Metro to put into those funds. And now we're taxing the community based on what our average expenses will be over that 24-year period. So taxes are nice and level and that we cover all the road costs in the long run. And I'm done.
You get road maintenance every year. Road maintenance every year.
Thank you. Kit.
Okay, I've spent a year on the finance, as chair of the finance committee, and this past year I was on the planning and governmental relations committee. So on the budget side, or the finance side, I think the biggest contribution I've made to the village is actually changing our process. So for instance, last year we did budget $25,000 to spend on a planner for planning and zoning to use for the comprehensive plan. We didn't spend that money. So instead of rebudgeting it, we're actually using the savings that went into the general fund to actually fund that this year. And I think this never was done before, but instead of continue to tax for the same things, and that's kind of what we did with roads as well. We'd budget $150,000 for roads, we'd spend 25, and everything would go to the general fund. So along with the long-range planning, the counting and the budget process was changed. So I'm pretty proud of that because it saves everybody money, tax money. The other thing is the builder's package. Everybody was completely frustrated with trying to build in Volente. The builders, the builder I have didn't want to deal with the city. As long as I would deal with him, he was fine. So if those are the biggest accomplishments, I think. In terms of what I think we could have done better, I think we should have followed the process that's required. Right now, we have a zoning ordinance that doesn't agree with our comprehensive plan. And I am a CPA, and I have been in finance most of my life until I retired. And for me, I like logical, straightforward process. And we kind of flipped it. So now we're out of sync, which we're living with, but we need to get everything in sync, and that's where I think we've fallen short. Because now we're playing catch up.
Okay, with that, I would like to thank our incumbent. Thank you for taking the time to come out on an evening like this and put your attention to this process. It's a very important one. This is democracy in action, and so I thank you for that. Do you have a comment?
Do we get to say any final 30-second closing things? 15?
Is that okay with you? 30 seconds then.
Poquito.
Sure.
In Piquito, yeah.
Get your timer.
Okay.
I'll do it. So closing remarks, Andy.
However the elections go, I think people, and this is my message to you guys, I view the village as a being, and that's an interesting science that's actually showing out that the planet Earth, they're seeing that this thing is actually a living being according to comparison to other types of animals. I think our community is a living being. All of the people in this community make up a part of the living being, arms, legs, pieces. However this goes, whatever happens, half of us don't go away. We're still attached. We can't, it doesn't do any benefit to hurt each other and stab each other in this process. We all live together. We should be able to continue on.
Oh, gosh, I don't please get out and vote. I really, if I don't win, that's going to be fine. I'm not going to hold anything negative against anyone. I'll be perfectly fine with however it goes. I just really would like to see as many people get out and vote in this kind of off year, so we know what the people really want.
Yeah, just vote, and I don't have any skin in the game. I'm here to help. I'm retired, but if somebody else wants to take over, so be it.
Okay. Thank you to all of you for being here tonight. There's tell your neighbors and friends. The next one is a week from Sunday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon at Teach Buildings.